Well, it appears Israel's done it again. Not only did we see the first operation that they pulled off, infiltrating Hezbollah's communication network, turning their pagers into effectively bombs, what we now see is that there's been a second wave of explosions that has rocked Beirut. And it appears that this was done so by infiltrating a second form of Hezbollah's communication infrastructure, as we had already seen them do the first time with the pagers. And this is something that's quite fascinating when you consider the nature of how truly intricate and advanced an attack such as this would be. And once we saw the fact of what had unfurled with the pagers exploding across Lebanon, we should have understood that there was going to be a second variant of what was going to unfold in relation to something such as this. Israel and the Mossad, very impressive when it comes to their capabilities of things such as this, and that is no surprise. And the thing that is truly so sad about that is the nature of how they've shifted their capabilities in tackling their opposition. Because now it comes with the fact of a callous disregard for human life, as we saw with the explosions that had rocked Lebanon and parts of Syria, with roughly 2,800 to 4,000 people being injured. We see that 12 people were killed, many of which innocent, not actually even the Hezbollah members themselves. It was just people who were around those explosions, two of which being children, and one of those children being a child who picked up the pager to give it to her father because it rang, and then it detonated, costing her her life. Absolutely and utterly horrific. And the thing that's so tragic about this is how this comes about, and it's solely because of the fact of the Netanyahu doctrine and how Israel has shifted how they tackle defeating their opposition on the world stage, let's say. Because they used to handle things such as this, going after people like that within Hezbollah, with targeted assassination campaigns. And that made it far, far easier to avoid the collateral damage of losing innocent human life. And you could make the comment, oh, well, you see, Israel's still doing targeted assassination campaigns. Look at what we saw happen in Damascus in Syria. Look at what we saw happen in Tehran with the strike that took out Ismail Haniyeh, Hamas's political leader. There are so many different ways that you could frame an argument such as this and say, well, you see, Israel's still operating within this standard of targeted strikes for terrorist opposition. But what you have to understand is the nature of how they've evolved has only shown the fact that they are willing to do whatever is necessary, and in doing so, they're only engendering more hatred from the wider world, which is turning the crosshairs of the world upon the Jewish state itself. And one of the only reasons they're willing to do this is because they have the backing of the United States, because in their pursuit of their attack upon Lebanon most recently, and Hezbollah specifically, not actually going after the Lebanese people, let's go ahead and make that clear. What we need to realize is the only reason they're willing to so consistently do things like this and kick rocks and dirt at Iran and tell them to go fuck themselves, well, it's because they have the biggest, baddest bully in the world, and that of the United States and the liberal world empire standing behind them. Otherwise, they would be forced to push for peace, and that would be something that would be incredibly valuable to see innocent lives saved, whether it be in Palestine, whether it be innocent Jewish lives in Israel, whether it be innocent lives in Lebanon or in Syria. So now let's go ahead and jump in and see what we've got with this second wave of explosions that's rocked Lebanon. From the Associated Press, Lebanon is rocked again by exploding devices as Israel declares a new phase of war. Jumping in now, here we see walkie-talkies and solar equipment exploded in Beirut and other parts of Lebanon on Wednesday in an apparent second wave of attacks targeting devices a day after pagers used by Hezbollah blew up, state media and officials for the militant group said. So not only do we see that Israel has capsized not one, but two different channels of communication within that of Hezbollah's infrastructural network, we also can understand that what they've done here is also completely distort their ability to rely on their own supply line. And in a time of war, this is incredibly valuable when you are going to be worried about the actual equipment you are using betraying you in real time. That is a major psychological factor that we must consider in something such as this. Here we see at least 20 people were killed and more than 450 wounded in the second wave, the health ministry said. The attacks, which were widely believed to be carried out by Israel targeting Hezbollah, has also killed civilians. We have seen hiked fears that around the two sides of a simmering conflict, which could now escalate into an all-out war. And as we know, we have seen consistent movement of Israeli troops and equipment towards the northern border of Israel along that of the border with Lebanon, which means this is something that very well could have been understood of breaking out into a wider conflict as weeks unfold. Speaking to Israeli troops on Wednesday, Israeli Defense Minister Yoel Gallant said, "We are at the start of a new phase in the war. It requires courage, determination, and perseverance." He made no mention of the exploding devices, but praised the work of Israel's army and security agencies, saying, "The results are very impressive." And yes, they were very impressive. It was also very tragic considering how many innocent people were caught in the crossfire of this. In Wednesday's attacks, several blasts were heard at a funeral in Beirut for 3 Hezbollah members and a child killed by exploding pagers the day before, according to the Associated Press journalist at the scene. An AP photographer in the southern coastal city of Sidon saw a car and a mobile phone shop damaged after devices exploded inside of them. A girl was hurt in the southern home when solar energy systems blew up, the state news agency had reported. So we see a litany of innocent people being harmed in the second wave of explosions, most of which not actually even being Hezbollah members, which is what's so absolutely horrific about this, which is why I mentioned the fact of Israel's callous disregard for human life in the current era of how it is they are tackling, fighting the people that are trying to, let's say, go after the Jewish state itself, which in many ways people within that of Hezbollah would say the reason they're targeting Israel is because of their treatment of the Palestinians, but that's a conversation that we're not going into right now. We're going to be tackling the matter of fact of what we see happening here. Now let's go ahead and move on and see what else this article has for us. The new blast hit a country still roiling with confusion and anger after Tuesday's pager bombings, which killed at least 12 people, including 2 children, and wounded some 2,800 others, which, as we know, these numbers actually range from roughly 2,800 to 4,000. The second wave also deepens concerns over the potentially indiscriminate casualties caused in the attacks, in which hundreds of blasts went off wherever the holder of the pager happened to be, in homes, cars, at grocery stores, and in cafes, often with family or with bystanders nearby. Let's just focus on one of those bits for but a moment, and then we'll move on with the rest of this article. Here we see this happened in homes, cars, at grocery stores, in cafes, and often with family or bystanders nearby. And that is why we saw the casualty count be as high as it is. And apparently, with this second wave of explosions, we've seen the casualties be astronomically higher than just the 12 people who died before. Here we see, while the pagers were used by Hezbollah members, there was no guarantee as to who was holding the device at the time it was detonated. Also, many of the casualties were not Hezbollah fighters, but members of the group's extensive civilian operations, mainly serving Lebanon's Shiite community. At least 2 health workers were among those killed in Tuesday's explosions. Doctors, nurses, paramedics, charity workers, teachers, office administrators work for Hezbollah-linked organizations, and an unknown number had pagers. So, an unknown number of civilian operatives that are simply doing something because it's a job that they can have to provide for their family. Many of the times, these people not being involved in any way, shape, or form with the rank and file terrorists that are willing to take horrific actions upon innocent people. These themselves were innocent people that simply had a job, and because of that, they were a part of the communication network with how the information was disseminated. And thus, we see, sadly, it appears many of them were injured in that, and apparently now we've seen even more people die. And you can scroll down here and you see this photo in its totality. Civil defense first responders carry a man who was wounded after his handheld pager exploded in the southern port city of Sidon in Lebanon, Tuesday, September 17th, 2024. Let's go ahead and see what else this article has for us. The UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk called for an independent investigation into the mass explosion, saying the fear and terror unleashed is profound. The UN Security Council scheduled an emergency meeting on the explosions in Lebanon on Friday afternoon at the request of Algeria, the Arab representative on the powerful 15-member body. Iran-backed Hezbollah, Lebanon's strongest armed force, has exchanged fire with Israel's military almost daily since October 8th, the day after a deadly Hamas-led assault in southern Israel triggered the war in Gaza. Since then, hundreds have been killed in strikes in Lebanon and dozens in Israel, while tens of thousands on each side of the border have been displaced. Hezbollah said its strikes are in support of its ally Hamas. Hezbollah announced 3 strikes on parts of northern Israel Wednesday, at least one of which took place after the latest round of explosions in Lebanon. Israeli leaders have issued a series of warnings in recent weeks that they might increase operations against Hezbollah in Lebanon, saying they must stop the exchange of fire to allow people to return to homes near the border. Israel began moving more troops to its border with Lebanon on Wednesday as a precautionary measure, according to an official with knowledge on the movements who spoke on condition of anonymity because he was not authorized to speak to the media. As I spoke about, what we saw is they were actually already moving people and equipment to the northern border of Israel weeks ago, and I assume it was because they expected that they were going to pull the trigger on this operation to finally come to fruition, so they knew they were going to need more forces in the northern sector. Thus, we saw that they were doing exactly that. So it's not just that they had only done this within the past couple of days, within this week per se. Just saying. Here we see, in his comments, Gallant said that after months of fighting Hamas in Gaza, the center of gravity is shifting to the north by diverting resources and forces. As Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu huddled with top security officials at Israeli military headquarters in Tel Aviv, the country's army chief, Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi, said plans have been drawn up for additional action against Hezbollah. Israeli media says the government has not yet decided whether to launch a major offensive in Lebanon. Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah is expected to deliver a major speech on Thursday. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the U.S. is still assessing how the attacks in Lebanon could affect efforts to negotiate a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. And it's absolutely insane to me that Antony Blinken is going to be talking about a ceasefire. Meanwhile, he is the person who is quite literally just consistently backing all of the actions of what Netanyahu and the Israeli government are doing. He is the mouthpiece for the State Department, and as per usual, he is completely fine with whatever actions Israel is taking. Here we see the pager bombings appear to be complex operations to be a complex operation months in the making. My goodness, I'm stupid. With many experts believing Israel infiltrated the supply chain and rigged hundreds of pagers with explosives before they were imported to Lebanon, but little evidence has emerged so far. Gold Polo, a Taiwanese firm, said it authorized a Hungary-based company, BAC Consulting KFT, to use its name on devices delivered to Hezbollah, but a Hungarian government spokesman said Wednesday that pagers delivered to Hezbollah were never in Hungary and that BAC Consultants merely acted as an intermediary. So what we know here is that this was also done with the permission of the Hungarian government, which is quite fascinating to see, but not a surprise when you consider the nature of Western coalitions with the government of Israel itself and their actions against people throughout the wider Middle East. Alrighty, here we're going to see, to finish this off, thousands injured in pager explosions, and I just wanted to go ahead and bring this up specifically to show you the layout of Lebanon, where these cities were, where many of these people were actually specifically impacted. And it, again, they're talking about the fact of how there are only 2,800 people, but as we know from multiple different reports, this is 2,800 people that were badly wounded, and then there are roughly 4,000 that were still affected in totality. So here you can see 1,850 in Beirut, 150 in Bekaa, and 750 in southern Lebanon as a whole. This is quite stunning, and I wonder the nature of evolution that we're going to see, but one thing that I can absolutely guarantee you is that the United States government will be backing Israel in whatever actions that they take, and I am most certainly not looking forward to dying in another fucking Middle Eastern war that the United States will be propelling my generation to go fight in, just as they propelled the one before me. Thank you for watching. I'm calling it there. Thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs down if you didn't. Tell me where I'm wrong in the comment section down below. Stay lovely, stay great, and most importantly, as per usual, tell someone you love them. Peace out.